feeling inadequate to be able to do that. Not just because of all his vast credentials and things that he has done in his lifetime that are so impressive. Dr. Richard Hart is president of the Loma Linda University. He is also president of another group that since 2001 has been a president of another group that does outreach across the world to bless underprivileged and underdeveloped nations with inexpensive health care. I wish Jesus could just be here physically right now and introduce him for us, because he was right there with the doctor when he was born in 1945 at Loma Linda University. It wasn't the university at that time, it was Loma Linda
School of Medical
Missionary. He was there in 1945, and he was also right there with him when he got married in 1966 to his wife, and who they've raised 3 children together, 3 daughters. He was there with the doctor when he was writing a book as they were in Tanzania doing medical missionary work. He was right there with the doctor when he was trying to get 2 medical degrees. And he's been there right there with the doctor each time he's asked for wisdom to bless Loma Linda University and all the many meetings that he's attended and chaired. He's been the chief executive officer of Loma Linda University since 2001, I believe, and since 2008, the president of Loma Linda University. And all of the wonderful things that this man has done. I've never met him, and I don't even know who I'm talking about right now. Where is he? May the doctor please stand up. Thank you.
Are you done?
Actually, you know, I was going to read the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey would say, but my phone went dead, and so all the information I had to read about you, I had to recite by memory. Anyway, I hope I was accurate to some degree, but I can tell by the credentials that I read that your heart is definitely in helping people as a medical missionary. You were the first missionary, I believe medical missionary, to serve outside of North America from the Seventh-day Adventist Church after you graduated from Walla Walla, is that right?
Student missionary.
Student missionary, okay. And I could go on. I do remember some other things about you, but if you'd like to come up, I'd like to pray with you. What a privilege to introduce Dr. Richard Hart, president of Loma Linda University.
Can this thing work? Yeah. Well, it's good to be here again. I think it was just about a year ago that we were here and enjoyed some time. I want to share a bit with you, and then, as I recall last time, there were a lot of questions from this group, so I'm going to save enough time to try to answer some of those questions if I can. I think I answered some. I was telling Judy on the way out, I think there's a couple I didn't know the answers to, so we'll correct some of those as well. One of the things when you're in academia and trying to prepare professionals that you struggle with is, what is the balance between knowledge and wisdom? What would you rather have, knowledge or wisdom? And how do you create wisdom? We have a course 501, the beginning of wisdom, and teach people how to be wise. That's the challenge you have in higher education in particular, actually throughout all education. And I want to talk to you about that a little bit this morning and then share some stories with you. One of the things I came across some years ago now that I've always enjoyed, I'm sure many of you have seen it, but it's Gandhi's determination. It's called the 7 deadly virtues, or deadly sins, or virtues. Think about each of these. Commerce without morality. Knowledge without character. Pleasure without conscience. Politics without principle. Identify with that today. Science without humanity. Wealth without work. And worship without sacrifice. It's been told that Gandhi, who you all know his story, and the founder of modern day India in 1947, and eventually assassinated, that Gandhi says, you know, I could be a Christian if it weren't for Christians. Wow. And I've always admired him and what he brings to, what he brought to life. So this evening I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we try to do at Loma Linda. One of the phrases I often use with our students, it's more important who you are than what you know. So how do we do that? How do we build character? Ellen White is replete with that sort of theme of how do you build character? And I think we've all recognized that you don't do this typically in the classroom. This is not something you can stand up on a board and lecture and say, here's how you develop character. Some years ago, when Dr. Lynn Behrens was president of Loma Linda, she led us through a process of developing core values for Loma Linda. And we take those very seriously. Now, let me share them with you. It took me a while to figure out how to remember them until one of our deans, Billy Hughes, came up with an acronym that helps. So J, Chiefs. J stands for justice. What is justice in today's world? You know, and how do we do that fairly? And as you know, the distribution of wealth is getting more and more disparate in our country in particular. The wealthy 1% versus particularly the poor 50% or 40%. So justice we consider a core value at Loma Linda. The C stands for compassion. Now we'd all kind of recognize that. But how do you develop compassion? How do you help somebody learn compassion? And you see, compassion isn't just sympathy. Compassion moves beyond feeling sorry for somebody to probably into what we call empathy, and then on into engagement. And compassion calls for action to do something. So the C stands for compassion. The next one is particularly difficult. Humility. How in the world do you teach humility? And particularly when we're trying, even in this country, certainly abroad, to work across cultural boundaries, we now have what we call cultural humility. How do you understand somebody else's situation across a different culture? That's tough. That's real tough. Let me share one story with you from our SAC clinic a few years ago when I was still chiefing down there. I was late as usual and had to get back to campus for a committee. And one of the things you realize when your chief is back, we still had paper charts. Carl would remember these days. If you're moving fast, you don't want the fat charts, you want the thin charts. The fat charts usually mean somebody's got a lot of stuff going on. With the thin charts, you can move faster. So I grabbed the thin chart and I'm going to see one more patient before I left. And as I picked it up, I looked at it and just said rash. The nurse had written on there rash. Well, that's pretty easy. I can solve a rash. In medical school, you learn that it's wet, you dry it, and if it's dry, you wet it. It kind of takes care of most rashes. So I said, this will be fast, let me go. So I walked quickly down to the room and stepped into the room, and there was a middle-aged Hispanic woman sitting over in the corner. I quickly shifted to my medical Spanish and greeted her and chatted a bit and says, can I see your rash? And she held out her hands, and I looked at them, couldn't see a thing. Pulled out my glasses, looked again, still couldn't see anything. I asked her to scoot out in the middle of the room so the light was better, and I still couldn't see anything. And experience had taught me, okay, something else is going on here. You better slow down and figure this thing out. Kind of mentally said, okay, committee, I'm late, but let's figure this out. And gradually her history came out. Single Hispanic mother, 4 teenage kids. Her husband had just left her for a younger woman. 6 months ago. She gained 40 pounds of weight in the meantime, and then she saw something on her hands that looked like a rash. She knew family members that had diabetes. She was sure she had developed diabetes. They lost their leg. What was going to happen to her? And you realize the whole story of understanding a person, what Paul Tillich calls the double diagnosis. That's what was going on. I happen to remember right at that time that right out across the parking lot, one of the trailers we had there was a group of Hispanic women in a weight management program, exercising to help lose weight. How fortunate can I be? I took her by the hand. We walked out through the building, out across the parking lot. As we walked up the ramp into the trailer, you could feel the whole trailer shaking with the women inside jumping up and down exercising. So I opened the door to introduce Maria to her new best friends. Took one look at her face and knew I'd blown it. There was no way in the world this woman at that point in her life could identify with a bunch of happy women exercising. So learning cultural humility, how to connect, is an absolute critical factor in today's world, certainly in this country and especially when we go abroad. So humility. The next one is integrity. Boy, do we need that today. And how do you teach people that there's core principles, core truths that you have to hang on to regardless of the circumstances? Integrity. E stands for excellence. We'd all kind of agree to that. But what we realize is that there's several kinds of excellence. One of the issue is externally validated excellence. Do I make it past my board exams? Do I do okay on this, on that, and the other thing? Am I passing the class? But more important is internal excellence, internal validation of who we are and what we do. And how do you develop the inner skills to say, I'm doing my best? The F stands for freedom. Now that may sound like a funny value, and yet there's a certain very liberating part of life to say, I'm free to do what I feel God calls me to do. And it's an important part of that aspect of life. And finally, self-control. Purity and self-control. J-Chiefs, that's the values that we have adopted at Loma Linda to try to teach our students. Now the question is, how do we do that? And that's not easy, as you can imagine. It's not the sort of thing, frankly, you can learn in the classroom. You can talk about it, but you don't pick it up. And we would kind of over the last decade have said the best way to do this is what we call mission-focused learning. And by mission, we're not talking about the mission field. We're talking about your mission in life, your mission-focused learning. How do you create a learning enterprise? And I've had an ongoing debate with some of our academicians on campus who typically look at community activities, global activities, other sort of stuff outside the classroom as extracurricular stuff. Remember that term, extracurricular? My argument, folks, that's not extracurricular, that's curricular. That's what's core to what we do. So let's don't consider it an add-on. That is absolutely essential. And one of the things we've gone to doing now, for a number of years now, are what we call SIMS, Students for International Mission Service. Has about 400 students a year go someplace outside the U.S. So that's about 10% of our student body, about 400 students a year. Some just go for a weekend down to Mexico where we run clinics. Many of them scattered all over the world for a month, sometimes up to a year, going all over. And we've been able to develop actually 2 funds now so that any of our graduates from any of our schools who want to serve abroad, we will pay their educational debts if they go to serve abroad. So it suddenly kind of opened up the world to Loma Linda graduates who now are scattering all over, kind of re-engaging with our institutions out there. So to do mission-focused learning, we've looked at this thing, and as kids come back, as the students come back from their trips, common refrain is, my goodness, that helped a tremendous amount. I understand myself better. It created what we like to call teachable moments. Because when you confront human need, you're forced to start examining yourself. I mean, who am I? How do I react to this? And so about 2 or 3 years ago now, we said, my goodness, if this is that powerful, why aren't we doing more of it? And so we've now set the goal to double our student mission group from 400 students a year to 800 students a year. And last year we hit about 670, I think it was, that went somewhere on some trip during the year. And this year we'll probably hit our 800. But to do that well, it's easy to go out and kind of tick off, boy, I saw these funny patients and all this disease and so on. But to make it reflective, to make it a learning experience, that's the trick. To try to make sure it has the impact that it has. And so one of the things we started doing is having mentors go with each group of students. Some students go 1 or 2 by themselves in smaller groups, but if there's larger groups, why we often have mentors go along. And that's been good for the mentors, because they start getting engaged and understanding and so on. Last summer, I had the privilege of going with a group. We had a very large group, had about 40 from Loma Linda, together with 3 other universities were involved: Babcock University in Nigeria, Montemorelos University in Mexico, and Middle East University in Beirut, Lebanon. All sent students together with our group, along with some faculty, and went to a place called Jengri Hospital in northern Nigeria. Jengri is a small 25-bed hospital that was struggling for survival, so we helped them build a new private ward and fix up some stuff and see a lot of surgery and patients and various things during that time. That was so successful from the standpoint of the impact on students that we are going to do another one this summer, and I want to tell you about this one. It's a kind of a fascinating history. There's a hospital of the Adventist Church that most of you have probably never heard of, called Bongo Hospital. Anybody know Bongo Hospital? In 1929, nearly 100 years ago, a graduate from Loma Linda by the name of Dr. Roy Parsons, as many graduates did back then, said, "Okay, I'm ready, I'm going to the mission field." And so he took off with these couple young kids, was sent to Portugal for 2 years to learn Portuguese, and went down to the country of Angola. A small mission station had been started down there by the great-grandfather, I think, of one of our hospital administrators now, Peter Baker. And Dr. Parsons showed up, as often happens with our physicians, started running a clinic, started growing. By the 1930s, he needed to build a hospital. And so Bongo Hospital was being built. And put up a fairly nice building. You can see pictures of it. And life went on. He raised 4 kids out there, 2 of whom became physicians. One became a lab tech. Grew up, got their training, came back and joined him at Bongo Hospital. And this place was a flourishing place for a number of years. But then in 1961, Angola tribes there decided they wanted their independence from Portugal, and civil war started. And there were several different tribes started to gain control of the country. The fighting started, became more and more dangerous around there. And they finally had to leave. Dr. Parson had learned to fly, had a small airplane there with him. They stuck it out as long as they could, and at the last minute they got on the plane and took off as they were getting shot at as the plane took off. Left the hospital, and for some years the hospital sat empty. Well, you can imagine what happens in that kind of a setting. It was devastated. People pulled the wiring out of the walls and the plumbing out of the walls. It just kind of decimated the hospital. In 1972, the revolution was completed. Angola gained its independence. But then 3 different groups in the country tried to gain control, and it slipped back into a civil war for another 27 years. Kind of devastated the country. There was a struggle between back then, the Russians were supporting the communist-related party, Americans were supporting the supposedly Democratic Party, and these things fought this war for on and on and on. But during that time, some of the missionaries decided it's time to go back. Can we go back and reestablish Bongo Hospital? So in 1979, the church decided to try it as the Civil War was going on, and sent a doctor back there, a young doctor from Spain, by the name of Dr. Sabate. Some of you may know Dr. Joan Sabate, who's one of, we call him the nutty professor. He's the one that did the research on nuts and the value of nuts for heart disease in Loma Linda at the School of Public Health. His brother agreed to go out there. And along with him went a nurse from Argentina, Victoria Duarte. And they went out to start working at this hospital in the middle of the Civil War. While they were there, Dr. Sabate's wife had a baby, but just a few weeks after the baby was born, the rebels came in, surrounded the hospital, and kidnapped Dr. Sabate and his wife and Victoria Duarte.
Oh my.
And took them hostage. But the rebels said, you know, we know what you do. We're not here to hurt you. We want to protect you. But we believe you are going to be hurt if you stay here, so come with us. And they started on a 3-month walk across Angola with their new baby in a basket. They finally, and it was fascinating, she was still breastfeeding the baby. And in good African culture, they recognized the value of that. So here's this colonnade of 200 soldiers surrounded by these 3 people and a baby walking across Angola. But every time it was time to breastfeed the baby, the whole column would stop, take the baby out, she would go off behind a tree, breastfeed the baby, come back and carry on the march. They finally got down to the southern border of Angola and was able to camp there for a while. They kept them there as hostage for a while, and then finally took them across the river into Namibia, and from there they were able to get on out to South Africa and come home. The church kind of gave up on the hospital after that for quite a few years. But 10 years ago, Victoria Duarte, that nurse that was kidnapped and walked across the country, now in her late 60s, said it's time to go try again. And Victoria came back to Bongo Hospital, and the last 10 years has been gradually trying to rehabilitate that hospital. Room by room, literally, with teams come out now and then. Angola still has been in kind of troubled times. They've actually struck oil, they've got gold, so there's considerable wealth in the country, but controlled by only a very few, and the rest of the country still continues to live in poverty. We're taking a team out to Bongo Hospital at the end of June to help rehabilitate the hospital, to do clinical services, to do a number of other things, mainly to give a shot in the arm to those who are literally holding this place together. Victoria is still there. She's now 75, still carrying on the heart and soul of this. It's been a privilege to become acquainted with her over Zoom or Skype and talk with her some, and we'll have a chance to meet her in person. We're going to tell the story of Bongo Hospital on March 2. Is that Friday night? Yeah, March 2 at Loma Linda. Excuse me, no, that's not Friday night. Sabbath afternoon, we'll tell the story of Bongo March 3. You're all welcome, Mission Vespers. That's our homecoming weekend. But Sabbath afternoon at 4 o'clock in the University Church, Dr. Bob Parsons, he's a lab tech, now 86, Roy's son. He grew up out there. He's coming to kind of tell what it was like in the early days. And a number of others. Dr. Sabate is going to tell the story of his brother that escaped, and so on, and tell the story of Bongo Hospital and then their future plans for it. It's those kinds of experiences that help to create character, that create values, that, and I must say, I mean, create's not the right word, that calls out core values. I mean, core values are frankly what your parents gave you years ago. But it's what needs to be called out and reinforced, that this is what professionals, this is what life is about, to do this. Let me update on a couple other things, and then I'm glad to open it up for some questions. As I recall, you all start going to sleep in about 15 minutes. So we are in the process of building a new hospital. If you haven't noticed, if you drive down the freeway right out here, or if you stand beside the freeway, about every, I think, 15 minutes, you're going to see a semi go by with a big I-beam on the back of it. That's Loma Linda. These are all being constructed in a warehouse near Phoenix. There's an old Army building there that's the size of 5 football fields in one building. And that entire building is now building the steel for Loma Linda Hospital. And so one by one these beams are coming by. For those who haven't been by recently, it's now coming out of the ground. It's probably up to about, well, part of it is up to about the 3rd or 4th floor now. And it's moving forward. It'll be 16 stories tall for the adult tower, 9 stories tall for the children's tower. It's not going to be done until about 2021, actually the end of 2020, by the time we get occupancy and be able to move into it. We're actually not expanding the hospital beds. If you want a challenge, trying to sit down today and figure out what healthcare will look like 20 years from now. How much will be inpatient, how much will be outpatient, who will do what, in what setting? Tough, you know, Don. Trying to anticipate hospitals is incredibly difficult in that kind of a setting. But we've done our best shot at it. We actually have not expanded our hospital beds. The new hospital will be about what we have now, but basically all very intensive care beds, because that's what hospitals are becoming. We don't go there to recuperate anymore. You get there to get well and get out. I mean, that's kind of the way the insurance companies call the cards. So that's moving forward. Our Gateway College, some of you heard me tell this story. This is our downtown San Bernardino clinic, and Gateway College is going well. We've had several graduations already. So this is picking up high school kids and giving them health certificates of various kinds. The programs they got going on right now is surgical tech, dialysis tech, pharmacy tech, medical assistant, and community health workers are being trained down there. So these are 6 to 12-month training programs that picks up kids out of high school. If you look at San Bernardino, our San Bernardino School District, and this is more than just San Bernardino, if you look at San Bernardino, we've got about 58,000 kids in the school district, 8 high schools. 95% of those families are on public assistance of some kind in San Bernardino. So most of these kids, frankly, don't have a chance to go on. About 20% of them get a chance to go on to college. So those are the kids we're trying to reach and give them a chance, give them a hope, give them a job. It's good evidence that if you can give one member of a family a job, you start leveraging the whole family out of poverty. So that's what we're trying to do. And of all the things that I've been involved with for 40 years now, I guess, at Loma Linda, we do some good stuff. But to go into San Bernardino and build a building in downtown San Bernardino, this has said more to that community than anything we could ever do on the Loma Linda campus. Awesome. It's kind of like, okay, you guys are out there in the hill, and we really appreciate you and we're proud of you, but now you've planted your flag in San Bernardino. Thank you for coming. Awesome. And for being part of this. So that's moving forward. The clinic, that's the 3-story building. The bottom 2 stories are a clinic. We're seeing about 100,000 patients a year already in that clinic. It's been open a little over about 1.5 years now. And that will keep growing. We have the largest number of specialty clinics in a community health center of any place in the country, I'm told. So it's a good thing. What I would point out, though, and I'll say this to Sam, I have said it to San Bernardino, you may think we're helping you, but you are helping us. This is a laboratory where we can develop character, where we can confront human need, where we can help our students to work across cultural boundaries, across economic boundaries, to learn what other people are going through. And what I particularly like about the clinic is we really have 3 levels of education that takes place here side by side, what we call vertical integration. So I've got physicians in all their specialty clinics. So I got the pediatricians and the obstetricians and the surgeons and the orthopedics and ophthalmology all getting their specialty training, chiefed by our faculty. I've got medical students, dental students, nursing students all getting their professional training. And I've got high school kids getting their certificate programs. Awesome. Working side by side in the same building. And what I try to point out is don't think these people teach these people teach these people. These people also need to teach the medical students and teach the residents what life is like in the neighborhood. This is what life is like on the streets. This is reality, folks. And learn to understand that and develop your cultural humility as you try to go forward. So that's going well. Let me touch on a couple challenges we face, and then I'll take some questions. The Adventist Church in North America is currently struggling, and it's struggling in several ways. And unless you make me, I'm not going to get into the politics of the struggle. But one of the struggles that we have is our educational system. We are gradually closing school after school after school. We have now closed 56 primary and secondary schools in this country in the last 10 years. Basically gone bankrupt and closed. The ones that are surviving have basically become Christian schools. Now some may question, my goodness, are we slipping that back? This is no longer an Adventist school, this is a Christian school. They're marketing to Christians. And there's times in my past when I'd say, my goodness, this is not the way we ought to do it. And yet the case can be made, and is being made, what we have to offer the world, our educational system, our educational principles, why wouldn't we want to share them? Amen. Why wouldn't we want others to come and learn from us? And so that's kind of what's happening. We have 13 colleges and universities in America, counting Canada, 13. We peaked out about 5 years ago now, 26,000 students in all those places together. I mean, I won't name them all, you know them, but Longwood, BBC, Walla, Bossier, and so on. The last 4 years, it's been a steady decline in enrollment in our colleges and universities. We're dropping about 700 students a year collectively in our schools. Atlantic Community College is now closed, went bankrupt. Several of the others are struggling on the edge. Because the feeder system, the primaries and secondary schools that feed our colleges are closing. So there's not as many students coming in. We're now investing, the college presidents are investing we've got up to about $600,000 a year now to try to find Adventist kids in high schools to recruit them to come to our colleges, because that's where they are. I mean, many Adventist families now don't put the same emphasis on Adventist education as they used to. And so kids are in high school, they're in other schools, and it's more and more difficult to find them and attract them into our colleges. So that's some of the challenges we are facing, and it's a real challenge. We have a workshop this summer in Chicago that we're going to be trying to tackle this thing and figure out what we can do. We've got to get more efficient, frankly. One of the challenges we have is most of our colleges want to teach too much because they want to have all the different majors, and yet we simply can't afford to be that diverse. We've got to figure out ways to get more efficient. There's a number of things we've got to figure out how to do that. So that's one of the challenges that we face. Let me perhaps stop and see if there are some questions that I can answer or things to go forward. Yeah.
In an overview way, how is the Adventist Church involved in the administration and the way that the hospitals are ran in China, for example?
Let me talk about China a bit, because it's an interesting sort of situation. Chinese law specifically forbids any faith-based entity to run a school in China. So there are no religious schools in China, period. It's forbidden. We came in at the request of Sir Ranaran Shaw, and it's a fascinating story. Sir Ranaran Shaw died about 3 or 4 years ago now at 107 years of age. But when he was a boy, growing up in a village near Hangzhou, his mother took him to see a doctor. None of us were around, obviously, but this is a story. And they met Harry Miller, Adventist doctor known as the China doctor. I'd like to claim Dr. Miller is a Loma Linda graduate. In fact, he wasn't. He was an AMMC graduate. Anybody know what AMMC is?
American Missionary College.
You got it, Lloyd. American Medical Missionary College, based in?
Battle Creek.
Battle Creek, Michigan. How many years did it work? 15 years, from 1895 to 1910. This was John Harvey Kellogg's medical school, and he was drifting out of the church, as you know. And as he drifted out, that's when Ellen White pushed the church to start another medical school. So from 1905 to 1910, the Adventist Church had 2 medical schools. One in Battle Creek and one in Loma Linda. But then the Battle Creek one shut down. And frankly, the faculty, some of the graduates and faculty there came out and started at Loma Linda in 1905. Actually, the medical school started in 1909. So that's where Harry Miller came from. Sir Rowland Shaw became acquainted with that, became impressed with the Adventists were doing. By the time Harry Miller died, or had to leave actually in 1947, 48, when the Great March from Mao Zedong came across China, he had started 17 Adventist hospitals in China.
Awesome. Wow.
We lost all of those. When the Communist Party came in, they basically pushed out all religion, everything. We lost all those hospitals. Some of those buildings still exist. There's one in Shanghai. There's 2 in Shanghai, actually. Sir Rowland Shaw came out with his family, grew up in Hong Kong, made a lot of money. He was a movie producer. He was a shipbuilder. He did a lot of stuff. And in his, about 30 years ago now, he said, I want to make a hospital in my home city of Hangzhou, China, about 2 hours southeast of Shanghai. And he says, who's going to help me? The Adventists. I remember Harry Miller, I remember the Adventists. So he contacted the General Conference, who sent him to Loma Linda, and said, will you come out and help me build a hospital? And so that started a journey that's been going on for 30 years now to start, to develop, to design, eventually build Sir Rowland Shaw Hospital. Now, let me tell you, this is not a hospital. This is not an Adventist hospital. This technically is a communist hospital, owned by the government, run by the university. But if you look at that hospital, it's now a 2,000-bed hospital. Wow. They've kept building towers. They're doing very well. One of my favorite stories from there, Gordon Hadley, our dean of the School of Medicine, went out there in retirement to help start it and had trouble getting the Chinese to understand how to keep the place clean. And the story is told one Sunday morning, they came to work and found him on his hands and knees with a brush scrubbing the walls and trying to get things clean in the hospital. They got the point. And since then, Sir Rowland Shaw has been one of the cleanest hospitals in the country, and it's just been ranked as one of the highest hospitals, best hospitals in the country. If you look at Sir Rowland Shaw, it'll say Sir Rowland Shaw Hospital on one side of the front entrance, on the other side it says Loma Linda University. So they're proud of that heritage. But it's a communist hospital. And what we've discovered now as China started waking up and opening up some, we estimate there are 400,000 Adventists in China. 400,000. There's not one Adventist school in China. Not allowed. So what we've been trying to figure out is, can we take our reputation with this hospital, in essence, break the law, and start a school? We can't do it as an Adventist church, but could we do it as Loma Linda University? And so that's basically the plans that we are moving on. And just 2 weeks ago, we had the leadership of one of the universities in Hangzhou, the Zhejiang University City College, on our campus. President, several of the key officers saying, Loma Linda, please come. We would like to work with you to start a Loma Linda University College of Health Sciences under our auspices. That's the way we'd have to do it to start with. Hopefully to build a framework so that in 10 or 20 years, whenever China relaxes a bit more, as it surely will, that we will have a base to start providing Adventist education in the country of China. That was a long answer to a short question.
I'm thinking that there's probably a lot more you can share.
No. It's fun. It's fun watching this thing because they all know who we are. There's no question they know we're Adventists. And yet they say, we value what you do. We're actually proposing starting several new disciplines. There's no such thing as dental hygiene in China, so we want to start that. As one of the other things, there's not respiratory therapists in China. So we're trying to find several disciplines that they need that we can introduce to the country and try to grow from there. Yeah.
I would like you to clarify, or I don't want to say denounce, but anyway, a story that I heard from a conscientious, positive thinking Adventist person, okay? Said that Loma Linda University has been sold. And I told her, I don't believe that, but anyway. And if the story spreads, here's a good place to clarify it.
You want to know how much for it? I hear that occasionally. Absolutely not. Never is considered and never will be.
And this afternoon I responded, and I said that you're coming, you can hear it yourself. I don't know if she's here or not, but she said, but I know for sure that one of the schools was sold.
One of the schools in Loma Linda or
Yeah,
somewhere?
I know one of the Loma Linda schools have been sold.
Loma Linda now has got, let me just run the numbers for you. So we have about 16,000 employees altogether. There's 6 hospitals that make up Loma Linda. So what you know is the iconic towers, the full-roof towers. The Children's Hospital connected to it, which is legally a separate hospital. The East Campus, which is our rehabilitation hospital. The surgical hospital, we do all the robotic surgery. I'm going down the road towards Redlands now. The BMC, our Behavioral Medicine Center, and our new hospital in Marietta. So 6 hospitals, 8 schools in the university, and about 1,000 doctors now in the faculty medical group. That's Loma Linda. And nothing's been sold. I can guarantee you are being considered to be sold. Other questions? Carl?
Could you comment on the number of Adventist medical schools that are in operation now and what the future holds in that area?
So there are currently 6 Adventist medical schools in the world. And we're trying to start the 7th. So Loma Linda started in Loma Linda started in 1905. The medical school started in 1909. About 40 years ago now, we helped Montemorelos near Monterrey, Mexico, to start its medical school. So that was the first one after Loma Linda. About 20 years ago now, we started River Plate University, University del Plata in Puebla, near Buenos Aires in Argentina, to start a medical school. So for a number of years, that was it. And then the last 3 years, actually the last 5 years, Babcock University in Nigeria started a medical school. Adventist University of the Philippines, outside of Manila, started a medical school. And Universidad Peruana Union, outside of Lima, Peru, started a medical school. So those are the 6 that are now functioning. Once the General Conference kind of lifted the lid on this, now every country in the world wants a medical school. So it's quite a challenge. The next one we're trying to work on now is in Kigali, Rwanda, the capital of Rwanda. That's been the second one for Africa. If you look at numbers, and we can argue all we want in terms of whether they should be doing this, but right now in America we have about 7% of the Adventist Church lives in North America. 7%, about 1.2 million members. 93% of the Adventist Church is elsewhere.
Awesome.
Africa's got about 3 million now. The country of Zambia in Central Africa last year has more Adventist members than the United States of America in the country of Zambia. They're well over 1 million now that they have. So other places want medical schools is my point. And it will continue. North Brazil is trying to start one. Zimbabwe wants to start one. And I get more requests than I can think of the places who want to start it.
How about Korea?
Korea has talked about it. They actually have looked seriously at it, but the government won't let them. Sam Yuk, of course, is out there. It's a good university, and we have the Seoul Hospital is now Sam Yuk Hospital. I don't know if you follow that name change. But I'm told that they've talked about this, and the government refuses to let them so far consider it. It's tricky to start medical. And the challenge we always face is, okay, do you want a real medical school or do you want a kind of make-believe medical school? Medical schools are expensive, complicated, and difficult to finance and to run and to build. And so trying to maintain quality is always the challenge as we try to look at some of these places. Did you already have one question?
I already did.
Go ahead.
I have another question, sorry. The money that it's taking to remodel and to develop the picture for Loma Linda Hospital, somebody says 1.2 billion or so. And,
really?
Is that, well, I'm sure you just wrote a check, right?
Yeah.
But I was just trying to find out how much of that money is actually raised, committed now.
Okay, let me talk about that. You're right, actually. The hospital itself is going to cost us about $1.2 billion. The entire project's about $1.5 billion, but we had to build 3 parking structures. One of these parking structures cost us about $20,000 a space, parking space. I mean, it's tough. Of that money, we have a goal of $225,000 in Vision 2020, we call it, for the hospital. And we're close to, we'll have that raised probably by next year of the philanthropic goal. The state of California is giving us $165 million for children's hospitals. And there's probably a ballot measure coming up this November for some more ballots. There's 8 children's hospitals in California. So as part of that, as one of the 8, our children's hospitals get certain allocations from the state to expand.
So that's 20%.
That's 20%. We're putting about another $200 million into it out of operating gains from the hospital over time.
From insurance.
From patient fees and so on. And then we're having to borrow the balance, so it's a mixture of things that we're putting into the thing.
Big money.
It's big money, absolutely. What about sleeping at night? I mean, this is big money.
So impressive though, really, the way that the Lord has provided from the beginning. And
We face challenges, folk, and I am the first to admit it. That outside my office in McGann Hall, if you haven't been there, we have what we call the Founders Plaza. And written in granite is the history of the first year of Loma Linda. And not infrequently, I have no idea what to do next. I don't know what the answer to this issue is. I go out and read through that. And you cannot help but be reassured that this place is God intended.
Amen.
And it's been there and it's guided through the years in so many different ways. So we still have a lot of challenges and will. One of the biggest questions you raise is, why do you keep getting bigger? Come on, aren't we supposed to have sanitariums in small places? I'm all for that. The problem is you can't run a medical school today without all the different specialties. And you can't support the specialties unless you have a facility to do it in. We've got 1,000 doctors covering all the different specialties. We have 760 residents. So residents are what we call when you have physicians in specialty training. So being trained as a pediatrician, obstetrician, internist, whatever, even a gastroenterologist. That's what we get trained in. We've got 760 of those being trained in Loma Linda. But to do that, you have to have the infrastructure. So if you don't grow in this world, you die. I mean, that's kind of what it's down to.
And there's 16,000 employees over there, did you say that?
Yeah.
Wow, talk about a paycheck to pay on.
Other questions?
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So what's the future of the existing building there?
Fortunately, we can use the building. When we first started, we thought we may have to tear it down. And for those of you who know, that building is actually built in 2 different sections. The south tower is not connected to the 2 other towers. There's a joint in between. And I can remember being a resident in the hospital back in '71 probably during an earthquake. And you look down the hall, and the walls kind of go like this. It's designed that way. And at first they told us, well, you're going to have to take down the south tower. Now we think they're going to let us keep the whole thing, and we'll convert it to outpatient use. So we can do a lot of things. This is not going to be encouraging to all of you, but we can put a nursing home in there, and we're fine. Sorry, that seismic level 3 is what you have to have for acute care patients. But you can run a nursing home, you can run a psychiatric hospital, you can have observation beds at a seismic level 2. This building will not come down. I'm told that's not the issue. It's not that the building would come down on an earthquake, it's that you can't maintain all of the medical gases and all the connections in the building to keep patients on ventilators and gas and so on going. So, but if you step down the level of care, then you're fine and we can do that. So we're looking at all the different things that we potentially could put into the old building. Any more questions?
I have a question. You were mentioning about the crisis in Seventh-day Adventist education with our schools closing, and you pointed out the problem. Have you thought about a solution? And could you help us with a solution?
We actually have, we just ran, it's our 7th, I think, program at Loma Linda, which we call Exceed, Excellence in Science and Experiential Education. What is happening is that many of our Adventist parents have lost confidence in the quality of our Adventist schools, particularly in the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so people who can afford to send their kids to school are questioning the quality of that. There's another demographic in this church that can't afford to send their kids to school. So one of the things we worked on some years ago now in conjunction with the church was to start what we call Exceed. So every summer we bring in, and we now run 2 programs, 100 students, 100 teachers, science teachers, who spend a week on our campus, who we give new teaching methodology, go them to the research labs, give them a real shot on the arm. Because the challenge we have, and I grew up in northern Idaho, little church school in Troy, Idaho, we had 25 students, 2 rooms and 25 students. So I understand that world. Our Adventist teachers are so isolated in our small school. They sit out there trying to beat their brains out, trying to be creative. They don't have enough budget, all the things they struggle with. So what we've done with Exceed is bring them together. We actually give each one of them a new iPad, teach them how to use that to make educational materials and all that sort of stuff, and give them a shot in the arm. And we've trained now probably, I would suspect, half of the science teachers in this country have come through Exceed now. The Oregon Conference has taken this particularly on. They've asked for a separate week for them for the last 3 years. And they've taken all of their teachers, and about half of their pastors have now gone through this. Another problem we have, frankly, is that our pastors, step on the toes here, aren't supporting Adventist education as much as they used to. And if you think it's a little bit better now, when you went back about 10, 15 years ago, 90% of the pastors graduating from our colleges were first-generation Adventists. In other words, they did not grow up in the Adventist church. They came into the Adventist church and are first-generation Adventists. Well, what that means is they're a high school graduate from someplace. They didn't come through Adventist education. So trying to get them to understand the value and commit to the schools has been tough. And so this is why, particularly Oregon Conference says, we want our pastors to understand this as well. So we brought them down.
Amen.
At first they kind of said, what in the world are we doing here? I mean, this is not our world. But I think they're getting the message, and we need to continue to grow that. But that's part of the challenge, is how do we, so what we're hoping to do is for a school to be able to say, and I can name off half a dozen little schools, they can now say, we're part of Loma Linda University. We're part of an educational system where your kids can move up through this thing and go as high as they want to go. And so that's one thing we're trying to do, to try to keep that system alive.
What about ingraining in part of our educational system the vocational aspect that you've been producing in the city with these high school kids? Not everybody's cut out for college. What about all of those in our educational system that need to know how to find a job?
Thank you for asking that. You just accumulated a sermon. I'm a farmer. We live up in Oakland, and I take care of 7 acres. And my relaxation is to putt around. I got to move fruit trees Sunday and Monday, and all the stuff that goes with that. So at our San Bernardino campus, we said, let's get into this. So we actually obtained 2 additional acres right between us and the freeway, 215 freeway, that we plan to put in a farm, a community garden. So my plan, being the farmer, is okay, we got this land. I'm going to come down there with my Troy belt and till this up, and we're going to work with these high school kids and teach them how to grow something. What I'm told is that's not too exciting anymore, and the new thing is what's called advanced technology farming. Okay, what's that? Well, they took me out to a high school at San Bernardino, San Andreas High School, and they had a grant where they do advanced technology farming. So what this is, they've got these grow towers where you've got a metal thing with little pockets in it that you grow lettuce and everything in it. You have nutrients drip down inside, the roots hang inside, there's no dirt there, the roots just hang inside, and the fluid goes, saves water. They'll tell me you can grow maybe 2 crops a year. We grow 12 crops a year. Wow. LED lights grow all night long, and the things keep growing. They have these other grow boxes. They showed us where they have these little things where they plant plants in this thing, comes along on a little roller, sticks its feelers in the ground, decides whether it needs water or sodium or potassium or what it needs, injects what it needs, goes on to the next one, checks it out, and so on. So we're going to try to get into that, partly because that is the name of the game. Let me ask you a trick question. What country grows the most food in the world right now? That's probably not quite right, but for its size. No?
Netherlands. And they do it by advanced technology farming. They've got these incredible places over there now that basically, through science, are producing extra crops and all this sort of stuff, controlled environments. You can't do it outside, you got a controlled environment. So that's exactly what we're working on right now, is trying to figure out how to do this. It's going to take some money. You often have to have a greenhouse, you've got to have other things. But that is the way to the future. And I became convinced when I went out this high school, and here was these, this is what they call an alternative school, which means these are kids that got kicked out of some other school, are there. And there was a couple of Hispanic kids, seniors I think, were standing up and telling us about what they learned in this classroom. And they were bragging about what they'd grown, and we took these vegetables home to mom. She never knew what this was before, and she's fixing these dishes. So we want to tie together agriculture and nutrition and community gardens with advanced technology and see if we can't create a whole skill set for these kids. So it'll be fun to see. It'll take us a little bit while to raise the money to do it. It's probably about $7 million, I'm told, to get this whole thing put together. But we're starting down that road. Yeah.
What about these other academies? They need to have some shot in the arm to get kids there and so on. And you can't do that kind of farming up in Maine or up in Alaska and so on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they probably could do it there, but that takes an expense.
Yeah.
I hope most of our boarding schools are struggling right now.
Yeah.
We just had last Sabbath, was it? Our reunion from my old school, Upper Columbia Academy, out of Spokane, Washington. You know, they're holding their own. When I was there as a student, we had 300 students. I think there are about 230 now, he said they have. Barely make their budget. They have started new stuff. They started an equestrian center there now, so kids come with their horses and learn horse husbandry and do things like that. The traditional old dairy and farm, which many of us grew up with, you know, probably isn't where it's at anymore. But there still is skills that can be learned, and I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of kids, they need to develop those skill sets, whether they go on or not. These are good skill sets. So we've got to be creative, but they can.
We invite some of the others come in to do that, to learn that.
Part of the challenge, folks, is our most precious asset, our kids.
Amen.
We are having teachers train them who are our lowest paid employees. I mean, teachers in the Adventist system are getting absolute peanuts, and yet we expect them to take care of our most precious asset. I mean, we've just got a system that's got to be redirected in some way. It's 8 o'clock, folks. I don't know when you all go to bed around here. Any final questions before we finish? Yeah.
Will you speak about our Adventist hospitals closing?
Well, let me talk about our hospitals a little bit. We have 175 hospitals in the Adventist Church. About 85 of those, about half of them are in the North America. And those are doing quite well. Occasionally one will close, but usually what that means is that it was one that was given to us or one that was struggling and so on. We've had two here in the West that I feel bad about, Walla Walla, you know, that closed. I don't want to get into politics, but a financial decision was made that, you know, we have the St. Mary's up there, it was a Catholic hospital, and they couldn't survive together apparently, and so we closed ours. Portland Adventist Hospital has been turned over to Oregon Health Sciences University. It's still an Adventist hospital and now has patients again, but it's really run as part of OHSU and their system. Having said that, there's others starting, and Adventist Health has added on Lodi Hospital in Lodi. It was new. They're looking at a hospital now in Ventura. They're looking at several other hospitals. Unfortunately, the hospital business has become a financial business, and that's the challenge. If I look internationally, that's an even greater challenge because we've got we've got 25 hospitals in Africa. Almost all of them are bush hospitals. I mean, the missionaries, you know, drove as far as they could, and then rode a donkey as far as they could, and then walked as far as they could, and then built a hospital. And that's what it feels like today. And so they're hard to maintain. They're on the edge of the cash economy. So that's what we do. You mentioned the other organization, Adventist Health International, that I'm involved with. That's what we do, is go around and try to get those hospitals back on their feet again and going, because if we do good service, we can do that. Some of the other ones are struggling. Phuket Hospital was actually closed in Thailand. We've got our hospital in Bangkok is actually doing fairly well again now. Phuket was closed, it's now come back on. And Phuket is starting to thrive again. They're rebuilding some of it and so on. But we've lost quite a few. And we've got to be flexible enough to kind of change and position ourselves in the economy that's there at that time. So it's not an easy thing.
I once heard a rumor recently that Loma Linda is the only hospital that the Adventist denomination owns. True or false?
That the Adventist denomination owned?
Owns. That the Loma Linda is the only one that is owned by the denomination.
No, let me clarify that. Loma Linda is technically owned by the General Conference. Many of our other hospitals are owned by unions. So, technically Pacific Union owns the hospitals in the Pacific Union and so on, most of them. Some of the new arrangements are getting into, and it's kind of a mixed ownership. But most of the hospitals in America are owned by the church. Let me say it quite. The default owner is the church. If the hospital gets into trouble, it defaults back to the church. They get into various creative financial things and so on. But no, I mean, if you define the church as several different levels, then essentially all the hospitals in the church are owned by some part of the church. If it's only Loma Linda, then they may be referring to the General Conference itself owns Loma Linda.
What about Hinsdale?
Hinsdale is another story that I'm not real happy about. Hinsdale was struggling, it's got hospitals around it, and was frankly going bankrupt, and it couldn't survive. So they put it together in a package to sell to other hospitals to survive. That helped, but now that whole package has been sold to another outfit. Pretty soon you kind of lose that. So yeah, I'm afraid Hinsdale is a kind of a look-alike Adventist hospital. It's probably never going to be what it was before. And those are our choices. I mean, one of our challenges is where do we find the Adventists to staff our hospitals? I mean, where do I find 16,000 Adventists to run Loma Linda? I mean, those are tough calls. And what we've done, we've set up a pretty rigorous system saying we're not going to find enough Adventists to do it all, particularly when we get into subspecialty areas. I mean, how many pediatric ophthalmologists who do glaucoma are there in this country? So you get into that sort of thing. But we've set up a set of criteria for screening potential faculty and staff that says, you know, whether or not you're part of our church, we expect you to understand, recognize, and value who we are. And we push that pretty hard. And I think that you'll find now, I mean, there's Jews on our campus, there's Muslims on our campus. If you ask most of those, they can tell you what Adventists are for even more than some of our Adventists, and they're committed to it. I mean, I've had these folk challenge me, are you sure you should be doing that on Sabbath? And stuff like that. So it is the world we live in, and I wish it perhaps wasn't. But on the other hand, these are good people who want to be part of our circle. And it's kind of back to the education thing, when you say, well, you know, we need to remain pure. What are we here for? I mean, we're salt, and we need to be able to kind of share our message and work with others. So. Okay, I think our time is one more.
Would you elaborate a little bit on the situation with Walla Walla General Hospital? As far as local Adventists were concerned, it didn't appear that anybody was happy with that decision, so...
You want to tell the story, Carl? Walla Walla's been struggling, the Walla Walla Hospital has been struggling for some time. Adventist Health sought to sell it to the the Catholic hospital there. They decided both could not stand side by side. They were running occupancy, I understand, they were down to 5 or 10 patients in the hospital. You can't keep a hospital going like that. So it was a financial barrier there are. Now the tragedy is there's a whole community that depend upon that hospital, not only patients but employees. And so it's part of our culture. But it got to the point where it was losing about $5 million a year, I think is the number I heard. They decided they just couldn't keep propping it up like that. the question some of us asked, okay, what is the value of mission? You know, is $5 million subsidy worthwhile to keep a hospital going? Is there some creative new thing that can be done with that? You know, those are all questions, and I don't want to get into the politics of that in terms of whether they made the right decision or not. But in the end, they tried to sell it to St. Mary's, but in the end, because of some legal stuff, that fell apart, so they basically had to close it down.
Dick, could I just add
Yeah.
one thing too? I think everybody here should be happy to know that the vast majority of employees of Walla Walla General Hospital have been re-employed by St. Mary's Hospital. So there are very few people who lost their employment. In fact, the board of Providence Hospital System, which owns St. Mary's, has been more than kind and understanding in terms of the mission of our hospital system and their hospital system. And they have made it very clear that they welcome our ideals for the community's health and the purpose for which the hospital exists. And so I think we can say that St. Mary's and Walla Walla General are on the same page as far as their mission is concerned, and they have taken in our employees and hired them.
Another hospital that's kind of struggling right now is St. Helena Hospital. There's a lot of competition come around it, and it's struggling to be financially solvent. So this happens, and it's just tough to work our way through. Let me give you one other invitation while I'm here. I'm sorry I didn't think about this earlier. On March 11th, Loma Linda is opening a new clinic in Indio. We're in the process of remodeling the building there. It's nearly done, essentially done. Actually, the clinic will open on March 5, but the opening ceremony is here. JFK doesn't have a very good reputation. Eisenhower doesn't see kids. Desert Regional doesn't do it all. So we've been begged for some time to come out and plant the flag out here in Indio. So it's right across the street from the city center in Indio. And they're delighted that we're there. We'll have a couple pediatricians based there. It'll be primarily focused on kids, but we'll gradually expand to families and so on. So I mean, you think that the challenge, we won't be able to start chemotherapy right away, but the issue is a lot of kids when they get cancer of some kind, an hour drive to Loma Linda, get some chemo, an hour drive back home every day, you know, vomiting, sick on your way home from the chemo, and so on. So we're trying to take care of that need by getting something started out.
Amen.
Dr. Hart, thank you for coming this evening and taking the time to answer our questions. And just want to ask that the Lord would bless you in your work. I just appreciate your insights with the administrative and the way the school and the hospitals are ran and sharing that with us this evening. It was awesome, wasn't it? Can we have a short prayer? Is that okay? Father, I want to thank you for the awesome and excellent blessing of being able to serve you and to know that you're a God who is interested in each one of us. And I ask your God that you'd also help us remember that you're in control of all of these hospitals and schools. And I ask your God that you'd send your spirit, your angels, and even folks who are interested in supporting these things financially. I ask your God that you'd bless in marvelous ways and help us to know that you're the one who is going to be able to bless all of these different things that are going on in the church and the hospitals and the schools. Lord, thank you for this doctor who came and this administrator who came, Dr. Hart. Bless him and all of his work and his life, his health and everything. Wisdom included, I pray in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.